Y'all, it looks like Wizard101 is about to make some serious changes to stat maxes at max level. Today, we have a really interesting topic. We're gonna be talking about cosplay. And no, I'm not talking about dressing up in cool costumes and going to Comic-Con. I'm talking about in Wizard101 cosplaying. Now, this is a term that I think the community just came up with. I don't know, I've been using it for a while too, but basically, it's when you're on a super defensive school, but you just run really offensive storm or fire stats and just come up with this extremely broken combo that just makes no sense. To give you guys an example of this right now, right? I'm on my debt, right? And I don't even have a jewel affix. So imagine that I had 6 more resist, 70 resist. By using a bunch of pins and using, you know, a headmaster staff and a thames and rings that give storm damage, I can run extremely offensive stats to storm that are way better than what a storm could run with this type of health or this type of resist. And this is an issue in PvE and PvP. It literally makes you able to make a better storm if you're not on a storm. I think essentially in their push for dual schooling, they've made a lot of storm spells trainable regardless of whatever school you're on. You could Storm Lord as a det and just have more tank ability than a storm, right? You could Storm Scion as a det in PvP, and it's really hard to counter this much damage with the tank ability of a det. So yesterday, in the test room Discord, Ratbeard actually put out a statement saying what they might be doing, and it looks like there are gonna be lower stat maxes for lower damage per pip schools that are going into higher damage per pip schools like this. Now, what I think that would look like is your stat cap right now as a det is 197, meaning the damage that I'm running to storm will not actually be penalized at all. And yet this doesn't factor in at all the fact that my det spells do a certain amount of damage and my storm spells do like, I don't know, like nearly, like 30-40% more. So what it might look like is as a det, your stat max for death damage might be like 196 like it is right now, and then your stat max for storm damage might be lower, like maybe 130, 140. I don't know what their number will be. You could do it to the point where you achieve this thing called parity, which is basically just you do the same amount of damage that you're expected to do for your health and resist regardless of what school you use. That'd be a relatively easy thing to do, but that might actually, I don't know, that might make it so that you are ignoring other burdens that come with using higher damage per pip schools, right? One of the sacrifices you could theoretically say I'm making in order to dual school into storm for its higher damage per pip is that I need way more accuracy, right? Which means I probably need an extra triangle jewel, which kind of does resemble a sacrifice. So if I'm sacrificing something for that triangle jewel to get higher damage, it might make sense that I'm doing more damage than a det would do. I think that's kind of like a conundrum in a way, because like you don't want the best strategy in the game to be everyone just to run a bunch of blades and storm scion or a bunch of fire traps and fire gen. You don't want that because that's silly as hell and it makes fire and storm just awful. It makes every other school better at what they do than them. But at the same time, you don't want to make it absolutely useless to duel into a higher damage per pip school as a lower damage per pip school, because how else are you going to seek damage? So maybe they could make a rule where you're allowed to get maybe, I don't know, 20 to 25% more DPP. I'm just throwing that number out, you know, based on your stat maxes, meaning, right, if you're a life and you have a certain amount of damage output that's expected, maybe your jewels and your stat maxes for other schools allow you to reach like maybe 15% more, but that's it. I know 15% more damage than your school's supposed to do seems crazy, but it's actually really not when you look at how crazy Storm's damage per pip is. If a det were to use a Storm spell and do the same damage that they're expected to do with their max damage, the Storm damage that they would be capped at would be, I want to say, like 100-ish. Like, we're talking nearly a half of what it already is, and death is a pretty high damage per pip school. When you compare what a death can do when they have, like, let's say a Jin, right? A blade gambit with 4 blades on a death spell, they can do 1700 damage with this. And yet, if they choose to use a Storm Scion, same number of pips with storm damage, you're not only doing way more damage just as a storm, but you're also ignoring all kinds of things like chromatic weaknesses, all kinds of things, right? So right now, it's too advantageous, in my opinion, to just be a storm on a det, but also you don't want to make it useless if someone's doing something that you can play around, like a dispel, a set shield, something where a second school makes sense to you. That is an insanely hard balance to strike, but I really do hope that it feels like you're rewarded for going into another school without it feeling broken if you abandon your first school. Now, one thing that I did notice about the wording of the actual message in the test from Discord was that they didn't actually mention that this was off-school stat maxes that are changing, which means they could be just changing stat maxes in general for lower damage per pip schools, but I hope that's not really on the table at all. I can't believe I'm saying this, but for once in an update, I feel like they actually nailed some of these stat maxes. I think like 70 to 75 resist for a death is kind of amazing. Like, I feel like anything more does feel stupid. I think if you play every school, you'll notice that it comes with the like individual strengths and weaknesses with stats. And I feel like if they're gonna tweak stat maxes, they shouldn't really do it with damage. I think they've actually gotten the damage, pierce, and resist. If you're actually using your school, you'll notice you trade well with most other schools. You'll have to play differently based on the matchup. There's a lot of healthy things happening, so I hope one broken strategy doesn't change all of that. I've officially played enough games to actually hit Marshall again in this season, which I feel like, you know, it's not that easy. And after that many games, the only really negative experiences I've had was with this type of strategy, where it's like a life or a death, and I have a ton of HP or resist, and they're just only using storm spells with like a storm mastery and a bunch of storm pins. It's a little broken. So if they really tackle this, I really think PvP is going to be insanely fun. I really do hope they find a way to balance out dual schooling with whatever this is, I guess cosplaying. I hope they find a healthy medium where you do get rewarded for using other schools, especially those that are higher DPP, because they tend to be low accuracy, but you completely discount the ability to do what's being done, which is abandoning your own school. It should also be super relevant in PvE when this change happens, because it'll make the choice that you made at the beginning of the game relevant, right? When you choose Storm, you're choosing a little bit of fragility, but you're also choosing a lot of damage, right? That combination, what I think is going to happen after this, that's going to stay intact for the first time since Novus came out. Since the pins came out, they haven't even considered this, so this is really good. I feel like now they're looking at things that are like, you know, a little bit more nuanced, but definitely worth looking into, so your choices feel like they matter, your school feels unique. The one thing that seems to be acknowledged as a problem that isn't going to be solved in the short term anyways seems to be the plight, I guess, of higher damage per pip schools. Right, this whole video we've talked about Death, Life, all of those schools that can just kind of cheese out a Storm setup, but what is a Storm and Fire supposed to do in comparison, right? They only have options to go into smaller damage per pip schools. And I feel like the only real reason you would ever do that is if the utility of an off school is that good. Like, for example, Earthwalker is a spell that counters overtimes and creates overtimes onto your opponent. A Fire might want to use that spell to set up something like an overtime gambit, right? Something that actually does more damage when you have 2 overtimes on your opponent. If there could be more examples like that, where maybe a Storm or a Fire would want to, like, I don't know, go into Life or Ice, maybe then there would be more, like, you know, more of a even playing field. It seems right now that lower damage per pip schools are completely in the advantage. So there is another aspect of this problem that will probably be solved in the future, probably not right now. What do you guys think about how they could change the stat maxes, and what do you guys think about dual schooling in general? I know some people love it. I know some people are like, yo, I hate this. I look forward to reading all of y'all's comments. I thought y'all wanted to be updated because this is like a big topic right now, definitely in PvP, but it should definitely be within the PvE community too. Let me know what y'all think. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. I look forward to reading all y'all's comments, and yeah.